Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I thought it would be useful perhaps to begin with the title, which suggests to me three things. First of all, that there is possibly no standard or transparent model of gallery practice in the art world at the moment. Surely not. Following on from this, that it would be, secondly, perhaps desirable to change this, and thirdly, how would we do this? And I get the feeling that another sort of title could have been to contract or not to contract, because people tend to invite me to talk when they want to talk about contracts, even if I don't want to. So I think today we will probably find ourselves discussing contracts, and contracts particularly in three main areas: between artists and galleries, between galleries and collectors, and between galleries and institutions. And I think that would be quite an interesting parameter for the discussion today, to think about specific problems and issues in these three areas, and then how they might be changed, and how there could be, I suppose, greater legal regulation. So I'd like to throw that out, and start quickly with my esteemed panel, and perhaps you could talk all about using the first parameter of gallery-artist relationships and your thoughts on these.
Shall I start?
Why not?
Hello, everyone. Well, it was very interesting because we had already a conversation through Skype a few days ago, and we found out different points of view. In general, my idea is that we are a sector where we are really very individual, and it's very atomized, the sector. So there is a problem of associationism, and it's really difficult to make rules for everyone when we are not able to arrive to agreements between the galleries. There was a movement a few years ago, especially in Spain. We have worked a lot in that, with this Instituto de Arte Contemporáneo. It's like a kind of institute that is formed by gallerists, artists, even collectors, critics, and museum directors. And we arrived to the idea that we had to find some codes together, and one of the points was the relation between the artist and the gallery. It was very useful. We didn't arrive to a good conclusion, but I think from that we can take a lesson. In general, what it happened was that the Association of Artists came with a very, I would say, in my opinion, and all the galleries, we thought the same, restrictive point of view. So they wanted to point all the items that have to be discussed between a gallery and an artist, but they were giving us the questions and the answers. So it was like, what's going to be the matter with the percentage, what's going to be about the transport, well, all the items we would be able to discuss with the artist. And they were giving the answer. It will be like this, like that, like that. So at the end, it was no way to arrive to an agreement. To talk quickly, because I understand everybody wants to talk, my proposal the other day in the conversation and now is that I think it's really very important to make a kind of a contract. It can be written, in my opinion, that would be the ideal, but I understand if it's not written in a contract, it can be written in an email. It can be written...
Can I just stop? I mean, I think this is all very, very interesting, but I thought maybe before we talk about models, it might be helpful just to sort of go back a bit and talk about what some of the problems are, where there are no agreements. I mean, from your experience as a dealer, what are some of the problems, and perhaps you could also talk about what the issues are. For example, from my perspective as a lawyer, I've advised both gallerists and artists where there haven't been agreements in place, and actually it's quite good for me as a lawyer, because you tend to get spectacular litigation when there isn't an agreement and when things go wrong. So from a sort of naked self-interest point of view, I would say the less regulation the better, actually. It's a myth that all lawyers want contracts, but I have from my experience two very recent examples of problems One is the typical gallery nightmare. The gallery nightmare where you've built up an artist for a long period of time. The artist has got big. It's like a marriage, and the artist wants a divorce. They're courted by a bigger dealer. The dealer is they leave the gallery. What can the gallerist do? And I think that's a common problem from the dealer's perspective. It's a sort of the big brother galleries, which we all know about without naming names. That's one scenario in which when there's this divorce, the gallerist said, well, what can I do? Conversely, I've also advised it where artists have wanted to leave galleries for very legitimate reasons, partly because the dealer has used the money from sales, which they've made to subsidize the gallery and pay other artists and pay other debts, and has wanted to leave the gallery. And you've been in a tricky position where all the artworks have been on consignment and stored to the gallery. They're on proper accounting records, and what can the artist do in this scenario? So I'd sort of like to think a bit, just before we go on to the new models and why we might want them and how they might work, what actually are the concrete problems of not having written agreements?
Yesterday I was shocked because I heard and listened to collectors and institutions complaining about galleries and the way the galleries approach them. And it was very odd because galleries complain in the same way about the artists. And so everybody's complaining about everybody. I think it's, for me as an art lawyer, what I think is very important is to know about the expectations of both parties in the agreement. So I think the problem is that the artist has expectations and the things the gallery should do for him or for her. And the gallery has expectation as well about how the artist has to behave. So I don't think it's so difficult to reach an agreement. The problem is to know what are the main the main points are to be discussed. And because there are no artists here, and there were no artists talking. I am going to talk on behalf of artists. A lot of my clients are artists, and they complain when they enter into a new relationship with the gallery because they don't have enough information about how the relationship is going to evolve in the time. They don't know how they have to deliver their work to the gallery. They don't know how the gallery is going to take care of the work. They don't know how they are going to be paid and when they are going to be paid by the gallery. They don't know who is going to buy this kind of work and if they will be able to know the name of the collector. So there are so many questions, and they don't even know what to ask. So, and I think the problem here in Spain when everybody tried to reach an agreement about contracts was that it was not a document drafted by the associations of different professionals involved. So the Visual Artists Association proposed a contract with a guideline, and there was no way. But the galleries, in my opinion, when they had this contract, they could have told something about it like, okay, this is the contract that visual artists are offering. We are going now to explain why we can do this and why we can't do the other thing. Because for me, when I saw the contract the first time, I saw, well, this is a huge document, very long document. We don't need this kind of document. It's much more simple.
Yeah.
And what can we do? So
that's very, very, very interesting. Do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, sure. So just a clarification. Actually, my position in Latitude, and I maybe should explain what Latitude is. Latitude is a private public initiative by the Brazilian Association of Contemporary Art Galleries with an agency from the government that works to promote 80 different economic sectors abroad. So, like, it's encouraging the Brazilian industry to get into international markets. So, Latitude is part of this project inside the Brazilian Contemporary Art Gallery Association. And my role there is I'm the head researcher, so I do market research and also advise in planning and strategics. So our understanding, and that's why maybe I'm participating in this panel, is we understand that research is the basis of planning and developing strategies for the sector as a whole. So we are trying not to guess what the problems of the galleries are. We actually going, and I do this every year, doing this very wide survey with the galleries, quantitative data, qualitative data, to try to understand what are the obstacles, what are the practice, what's happening in the market, and of course monitoring growth, employment, etc. So concerning this theme of transparency and practice and relationships between galleries and artists, of course this is an issue that appears. We have like 50% of the galleries have only verbal agreements with the artists. The other half, they have a mix. But they all say that they would like to change that, but how to change? Another question
so there's a consensus that there should be change, you're saying?
Yes, there is a consensus
amongst the galleries
that
and the artists.
Yes, they are looking forward to a more formal relationship,
Right.
let's say, where things would be more clear. But it's not totally happening yet. The other question is still concerning the questions with the artists, that the artists are very skeptical relating to declaring taxes, etc. So the terms of the agreements, and especially in the like invoicing, etc., many artists, they do prefer to not have things on the paper. So that's something specific about the Brazilian art market.
It's not just dealers.
Yeah, no, in this sense, it's in the other way around. So one of the things we are planning for this coming year is to have workshops for artists, for them to understand better, like accountant issues and how can do maybe better money-wise if they have things clear, and sometimes opening a company so they pay less tax than receiving money as a individual, as a person, and so this kind of advisement. So this is one of the questions we are dealing with.
And Alberto, are you broadly in favour of having contracts? I mean, what are the problems for you as a gallerist in not having contracts? Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, it's not easy, really. In my opinion, of course, it would be great to have a contract and to discuss everything that it's discussed in an informal conversation with the artist. We try to sometimes to put it in a paper and to say, well, I'm sending you what we have talked about this project, about this production, about this fair, and I try to have it always written. But it's true, on the other hand, I was remembering Kamel Mennour when he was saying after all these years he still have no papers, and there is a shake hands
and what were his
deal.
reasons for that? I mean, one thing, was he saying that it sort of breeds suspicion and distrust?
I cannot talk about him, I can talk about myself, and I can tell you, for example, last week I opened an exhibition in the gallery of an artist, and we came to have dinner, and we realized that we have been working together for 14 years. After 14 years, I don't see very easy to call the artist, you know, now things are changing and we are going to sign a contract. What are you talking about, Alberto? We know everything about each other. We have talked about everything. There is no need. So probably if you go into the past and you have had a relation with an artist for a long time, probably this contract is not really very, very necessary. And on the other hand, if you have this relation between emails, probably it works as a contract.
Yes, it's a
Well, I
contractual document.
wanted to talk about that. I mean, it's a myth to think there's never a contract. There's always a contract. But whether
There
it's
is always
oral,
a contract.
but
Yes.
the problem is not knowing what the terms of the contract are. And that's one of the good reasons, I think, for having a written agreement. Because when you try and instruct lawyers to piece together that contract when there's a dispute without something being written down properly and recorded, then it's a nightmare territory. And in the end, it's actually the lawyers who are the winners.
Well, just excuse me, when I was going to talk about that, my idea is that there would be like a kind of collaboration agreement with all the items that have to be talked. Not with the advice, you have to talk about this and we advise you to do that. No. You just give it open and make a big paper, well, a big paper with all the items that have to be discussed. And then the gallery is able to talk with the artist and to arrive to different agreements in all the items. I think that would be the ideal solution, and especially with the new artists you are going to work with. Perhaps with the artists you have been working for a lot of years, there is not that need, or that it would be great, but it's more difficult. That's my opinion.
Yeah, but it's a question of knowing what to discuss.
Yes.
So, and there is always a verbal agreement, and these emails are a contractual documents that are valid before the courts. So it's not the way or the shape of the paper where you write everything, is what you write, what is important. And a checklist is a very good idea. But yesterday I was doing a little bit of research, a survey between the gallery owners here, asking questions. Yes, tomorrow I'm going to talk about transparency and contracts in the panel. What do you think about? And 90% of them, they change the topic of our conversation.
I mean,
they were not interested. Some of them.
I think that's absolutely right. Galleries on the whole do not want to have written agreements, and that's the sort of norm from my own experience.
Because they think that the agreement can deteriorate the relationship between the artist and the gallery. It can be like a kind of proof of mistrust and appreciation, lack of appreciation and trust in between the gallery.
But I think there's a movement certainly at the higher end of the art market with blue chip galleries to standardize the relationship between artists. And there was a lawyer in New York called John Silverman who acts for artists like Richard Serra and so on, and he acts as their lawyer in these negotiations and drafts the agreements between, for example, Gagosian and Richard Serra. So I think certain tiers of the art market, and I think that's also something we can bring into the discussion later, is what's the market? Does it make sense? Where do contracts make sense? Which types of artists and which types of galleries may function properly for? Others it may not fit, and I think that should be something I'd like to throw out to the audience later. I mean, I haven't had that much experience of dealing with artist gallery contracts because I haven't been asked to. The main example has been dealing with a rather bizarre gallery in London called Halcyon, which I consider to be a rather off-market gallery anyway, which has probably delivered the most bizarre and one-sided agreement I've ever seen in my life. And negotiating with the MD, who was a former Israeli army officer, wasn't too easy either. And certainly my client, who's the artist, needed legal representation there. So I think you're in a situation where the culture of the contract really has to be sort of seen in all of its specificities in different contexts. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, no, I just had a comment. I think there are different ways that different generations of galleries deal with this question.
Yeah.
What I've seen in the Brazilian art market, that's a quite new market, it's a growing market. For you to have an idea, more than 50% of our galleries, and I'm talking about a survey of 50 contemporary art galleries, they were created after 2000. So these young galleries, they are much more formal in a way. They're much more business oriented. They have contracts with the artists they want to. When the artists that are starting in the market, they want to have things clear. Just before traveling, I was in an event and an artist came to me and said, "Oh, I'm so happy, I just signed a contract with a gallery that opened 2 months ago." So, so yeah, and I've been,
This could be a new thing.
coaching and dealing with these young galleries, and they are much more concerned with these questions because they don't have, they are not around for such a long time. They don't have time to establish this trust relationship that comes with time. So they are very concerned in making things more clear. And of course, it's completely different from galleries that are around since the 70s, where they are like, we have in Brazil, like galleries that are like mothers for the very important artists. I think they never sign anything. But it's changing. So it really depends on the profile and the kind of business. But I see the new generations really having a different attitude towards that.
I think that's very, very interesting, and I think I liked your point very much, Alberto, about it's very hard to retrospectively create contracts and legal relations and so on when you've been in a relationship for 5, 10, 15 years with an artist, and I think that is an issue.
Well, that's the contract is made after a lot of years of relation. Anyway, I agree with you. We say in Spanish, no hay que matar moscas a cañonazos. You don't have to kill ants or flies with a nuclear bomb. So perhaps you have to see the size of the gallery, the type of the artist, and probably Richard Serra will have a bunch of lawyers making an incredible contract with all kind of obligations. But perhaps most of the people would like to know what to do with a medium-sized, little-sized gallery, and with artists who are starting, and it's not that difficult to make this, what I was suggesting, this checklist, things to discuss and things that we understand. It's my obligation, it's your obligation, and I don't think we have to tirarnos los platos a la cara to fight each other. But the truth is that there are obligations for the artists and obligations for the gallery, and obligations altogether through the collector. So these things...
Well, I think that's an interesting point now to move the discussion. We've discussed a lot the gallery-artist relationship, and I think it will be interesting to think now about other relationships between galleries and collectors, and galleries and museums and public institutions. Can I throw that open to you, Eva, to begin with?
But first I would like to say one thing, because I think sometimes people are afraid of lawyers. So Sometimes, yeah. So I think us as a lawyer, or as lawyers, we should reflect on the kind of language we use for our documents, because it's much easier. It can be much easier. The problem is when you use this kind of legal words that scare people, that they don't know what is the meaning of, and you start to talk about international courts, commissions, something. This kind of legal words that people don't understand. So, in my opinion, lawyers have to make an effort to make and to promote and to make easier the relationship between artists and galleries. The problem is when a lawyer participates, for example, the gallery has a lawyer. The artists tend to mistrust that lawyer. Or the artist has a lawyer. The gallery tend to mistrust that lawyer. So it would be fantastic to be able to have the artist and the gallery together with a lawyer. Let's talk. What are you expecting from him? What are you expecting from her? And then, in a very, very easy way, I'm going to put it on paper. That's it. It's not difficult at all. Why are so afraid?
I'm going to be out of a job if you carry on like this.
That's right. We should find a lawyer.
No, but this is my way of doing things, trying to make things easier. We are not here to make things more difficult than they are already. So we had to reflect as well on that. I agree.
Reminds me of the Marx Brothers sketch, the famous between Groucho Marx and Chico Marx, when they try and read this document, in the end they get rid of it and shake hands and say we have an agreement. It's a bit like that. Do you have something to say on this?
No, I totally agree. And by the way, I'm a lawyer too, but I don't practice anymore.
The best kind of lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, should we just open up to I think before the panel discussion starts, I mean the audience discussion, just comments on sort of other aspects of the gallery, standardization and relationships with collectors and other protagonists as well as artists. Do you have anything to say about this, Alberto?
Yes, well, it's what I was saying, of course. If we have an obligation to the collector, it has to be dealt with the artist. And, of course, we receive, well, I didn't say that for the public, but I am a president also of the Association of Galleries in Spain, so we try to standardize a lot of things. And we have this relation with an association of collectors in Spain, and they try to arrive to agreements with us how to deal when you make a sale and what to give to the collector. It has been talked in recent conversations these 2 days, and probably there would be necessary to make this list not only for the artist, but what to give to the collector. And it would be interesting also.
What would you suggest?
Well, the same thing. It's try to tell all the galleries you have to, as long as you receive an invoice from the artist, you have to send the invoice to the collector. You have to tell him the technical things about the piece. You have to say the manual, how to deal with it.
Do you provide certification, for example?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Always. We provide certification and well, we work especially with new media art, some of our artists, and I can tell you I learned a lot from my artists. Some artists, they have a book, what to do. I like very much what would happen if they die. This is something I love. Okay, so you can die and I will be able to restore the work. It's amazing, or the collector.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's very dramatic, but in a way, it's how things should have.
And that's how the
done.
artist's legacy can be protected over time as well. I mean, I think often collectors are shortchanged by galleries in lots of ways through scant documentation, sales are often concluded with just a sale invoice, and from my own experience this causes a lot of problems, particularly in the secondary market. With secondary market you see things like the recent Nerdler scandal where because there's not due diligence, provenance isn't disclosed, you have the possibility of fakes on a big scale, you also have title issues, ownership issues. All of these problems, I think, are sort of exacerbated through the opacity and lack of regulation often in the art market, particularly in the secondary market from my own experience. I mean, to give you an example, recently I've just been instructed by a major museum that bought a major artwork by a major artist 3 years ago, and this artist at the time said it was a unique work, it was sold as a unique work, and now they've discovered it's being copied as an edition of 3. And that raises very interesting questions about authentication. Both ways, I can see it from the museum side and also from the artist and the gallery side. And what do you do with issues like that when you don't have proper documentation? And that goes wider than contracts. It's not just a contract issue. It's about the absence of documentation, I think.
Yeah, well, hearing you both talking, it makes me think that the important role of sectorial organization and associations like the ones we represent, of preparing these galleries in all these aspects, because of course the more experienced ones, they know what they have to do with the client, what kind of inform and what kind of document to deliver, or they learn with time, but they do. But the ones that are starting, they really need guidance. So I think to understand that, the different needs and profiles of galleries, and to provide ways of them to get more professionalized and they'll not have to deal with problems later on in their business is quite important. I remember galleries coming to me and asking exactly, should I give a certificate? What should be on it? Things simple like that, but that are important for the ones that are starting. And especially if it comes to new media, etc., how many editions should we make, and so on and so on. In case that the gallery produces with the artist is another thing. So it's really to have things clear and documented.
At the same time,
important.
we have to be very cautious about the word standards, because everybody wants to be independent as well and free to decide how to manage their business.
And art's a fluid activity. If we regulate art, what's left in the world?
Of course. So when we talk about the standardization, I start a little bit to tremble, because we are in the private sector when people should decide how to work. So it's important to know what are the key issues, what the key points to talk, but later everyone has to decide how to behave.
Yeah, but giving the tools and what one said,
yes,
like
and have to
guidance,
information about how others do it.
Well, the truth anyway is that we are working with a world that is changing very quickly. So it used to be a few years ago everything about painting and sculpture, a photo, and things were more or less easy and clear. But now there is this new media, there is a lot of options to produce a work, and it can be probably we simulate to know what to do, but I'm afraid that we are learning at the same time that we are practicing. So the more you practice, the more you learn how to do things, and there are probably artists and galleries who are starting, and there is not a code because everything is new. And I think we have to understand, everyone, even the collectors, that it's not easy to take a decision when something is new. I think, of course, we have to encourage our work and try to standardize everything. But it's not easy, really. So.
But I like what everyone's saying here, which is about not creating prescriptive models. That if there are contracts, it's heads of terms, it's educating people and getting people to understand how to apply these things in their context. It's not saying this is what you must do in a sort of didactic way. And in that respect, I think it's any contract is created, and I think there is a case perhaps for an art gallery, an artist gallery contract, much as there was when Sef Sieglab in 71 with Poprojansky created his famous artist contract, which was then about the relationship between the artist and collector. It has to be more than a manifesto. It has to be really a kind of a sort of open document with a set of possibilities rather than a closed formula, I think. Should we open it out to the audience? I think that would be a good point to start. By way of a caveat, I hope Chatham House rules being English and all, I hope we won't be heckled and there'll be a slightly different approach from the last audience participations I saw here. Okay.
Somebody suggested at one point that the art fairs, and I'm now thinking of the major art fairs, should make a contract between the galleries and the buyers from art fairs, because apparently it is so, and I've also experienced this myself, that in the rush of the opening of an art fair, a lot of art is bought and sold, which is later not paid for, or 3 days into the art fair, the buyer comes back and say, "No, I'm not going to buy it," which makes a big difference for a gallery. And with the authority of the art fair, I think it would have to be a mutual thing between at least the 3-4 biggest art fairs. A particularly formulated contract which both gallery and buyer signs at that moment would enhance the legitimate situation, wouldn't it?
Do you have anyone in mind that's addressed to, or is it to all members of the audience panel? Anybody?
Well,
I think the gallerist should
I
go first.
have suffered what you said several times. In fact, we we have a contract, and when the collector comes and we don't know him, we try him to sign this, and then they start to make like this with the hand. Say, well, you know, it's just an agreement, and you agree that you are buying this piece, so if you are not giving me anything of money, at least you sign it. And unfortunately, even signing it, they come back and then they regret. I think it would be great, this idea, because perhaps with the force of not individually the gallery, but the fair is telling all the galleries to do something in the same direction, probably the collector, the buyer who is not sure, he can take a real decision if he sees that it's something in common general. I think it's a very good idea.
But can I ask, who would enforce this? Would it be an association? Would it be the fair, or would it be the specific gallery? I mean, I think if it's to have teeth, it would have to be more than just the gallery. I think that's what you're suggesting, the gentleman in the audience, isn't it? That it's more than, it's a fair as well enforcing this agreement. Am I right? Yeah.
In the gallery, it's a different situation.
Can I ask a collector in the audience what they feel about that? Yes, I was looking at that gentleman over there.
The collector.
The one.
The collector.
Is there any other collector? I'm pressing galleries to do it,
Right.
and I'm signing it very happily. And the question about who should enforce it, it is simple. I mean, buying a washing machine or buying a work of art is not the same thing in your mind, but technically and legally it's the same. So there are certain rules about the time, depending on the city you are, the jurisdiction you are in.
Yeah.
You have the right of retractation after, depending on whether the purchase is happening on the spot. You know all those rules, and those rules should apply the same way to an art fair. I personally don't understand, and for me, when I'm shaking hands or signing a document from a galleries, I'm perfectly aware that maybe this is something of a part of my budget, but it is something that can make or break a gallery. And when I hear collectors that are, like it happens a lot, there's a massive wave of renegation right now. It's very well known around, and because it's the crisis, and a lot of collectors feel that I can change my mind, and he will not come after me anyway. I'm really ashamed, and I name them to shame them when they do that. Yes, I can give examples of things that happened. And I'm really not happy with that kind of situation, because it's and I don't understand why, the same way as auction houses are not chasing the non-buyers, why galleries should not chase. I mean, why should I take responsibility? Why if I run away from buying a car, I mean, the guy will come after me? Why is it different in the art world?
It's a power thing, isn't it? I mean, it's about who you are as a collector.
Yeah, is it the same when you're buying a Rolls Royce? You're probably 200-300 guys buying it, but what is it? I mean, I don't get it.
Well, yeah, I would say there are some differences, because the art market deals with relationships, and a client that's not just a collector is not just a client that the gallery is going to see once. So I think they are afraid of also getting in trouble with the important collector that will never come back, and maybe will also damage the image of the gallery. But certainly it should be ways of minimizing this risk that the gallery takes.
I mean, I think it can also protect the collector too. I mean, I think sometimes galleries offer works or don't understand what they're offering, and then they withdraw the offer because a more important collector comes along. And I mean, I know one gallery where there's a very well-known director who's managed to sell the work twice on the same day to different buyers.
Can I give a practical example of that?
Yeah. Well, without naming names, I don't think this should be a sort of
it's
show.
fine.
Okay.
But I bought a piece of Roy André Cartin at the Museum d'Art Moderne in Paris from a French gallery, and it was done at the opening of the show. I said, I can pay now if you want, because the show will last 2 more months. And after 2 months or something, the show came down, and the galleries never took contact with me, said any invoice. I said, contacted them and said, because we decided, we did on the phone and everything, and after she said to me, "Yeah, sorry, but I thought you didn't want the piece anymore because you didn't call me to ask for the invoice." And I was so pissed off because never ever anyone did this. And she said, "I'm sure you sold it to someone else." And no, it's not true. I can offer you another piece. But I said, "I don't want another piece. I want this piece." And I lived with this piece for 2 months because I was sure it was done. Eventually, I talked to the artist, Ryan Trecartin himself, and he said to me, "Oh, but this piece was sold to François Pinault." So, it's not a wrong story, it's a real story. So it happens.
And did you sue the gallery?
No, I didn't sue her, but I made enough noise at Rotterdam that she will never forget about it. And I make it well known as well. So.
Okay, well, that's a very helpful illustration, I think, of the problems at stake. Does anyone else have?
I would just want to enhance that it would take off the heat of both the gallery and the buyer if there was some kind of official contract issued, particularly by a third party, namely the art fair, where this is. It would take off this unpleasant moment of have to force your will.
I think it's a good suggestion. Can I open the discussion out a bit more to have some other participants? The lady at the back.
I had maybe a question to Alberto or to the entire panel. When a friend of mine who's more of a copyright lawyer I ask him for advice. I run a non-profit institution of how to, if we should or should not have contracts with students, with artists, with galleries with whom we co-produce. And he always makes this suggestion, which is cheap for us, is exactly what Alberto says, like, well, don't make a contract, make a mutual covenant or agreement in which you make lists of issues to discuss so that it's out in the open, so you have covered it all. At the same time, I never really had a conflict with anyone, so I don't know what that means in a situation of disagreement. And I was more wondering, or my question would be like, or what my advisor says is like, contracts are only about expectation management. They're not about legislation, so you could also do a survey with an artist. I mean, thinking of Paul Maines, who published in the 80s this really interesting kind of conversation with his galleries, with his artists, or politically active artists, called Was erwartest du? Or what do you expect from me as a gallerist? And then some artists like Daniel Buren were very practical, saying, I want the gallery to pay this for me, and others wrote a whole essay. But my question is, like, are contracts about expectation management, or should they really be tools for legal recourse in cases of conflict?
But there are guidelines.
Yeah.
So I was reflecting on that because when I started to work in this domain, we were talking about contracts between galleries and artists, and it's almost 15 years ago. So what happened? We didn't change anything. We still debate the same issue. So there must be some other hidden reasons behind that avoid to be able to set a guideline or a contract. For example, I was talking to Adrian, and he was showing me a book about a contract that FEAGA was proposing to galleries all around Europe. But there are some people here that don't know about that contract. So what is happening? What are the hidden reasons that avoid that?
I don't know why so many discussion about contracts, because I think it's a more easy thing and more convenient to do. So I make always agreements with my artists, and that is to protect me and to protect the artist. We are now in an era of internet. There are also a lot of legally problems if you don't have the copyrights and plus things. So I think it's very important to have a minimal agreement, and I don't know why it should be so difficult. So it's a business, and it's a business plan, and it's not a Rolls Royce, but it's a piece of art, and it's again money. So I think should be transparent and not the expectation, and work with reality and make agreement that pass good to the gallery and to the artist, or to the collector and the artist also. You know, they are collectors, they begin to pay, and after they don't pay more. So,
is anyone violently against contracts here? It would be interesting to see. Good. Can you put your view across? Thank you. We want this on record, so I think you have to. Thank you.
I think that the gallery stands for the artist. So I don't understand the problem between the artist and the gallerist, because the artist needs a gallerist to sell the work and bring it under the attention from people who buy art. So I figured there shouldn't be a necessity between the gallerist and the artist to have a contract, but between the gallerist and the buyer.
Well, it has to be in both directions, because...
I don't know, because if I'm an artist, I would like you to take care of my work, because I'm an artist. I don't know nothing about money.
But if I sign a contract with the collector, and I have to talk to you, and you are not giving me what the collector is asking me, and there is no contract,
no, but the deal with me, I'm the artist, and you're the gallerist, so I say to you, take care of my work. Do it. That's a contract. So there's no problem. I don't need a contract. You're going to take care of my work, take care of my money, and take care of me.
Okay, you are great to say take care about me, but it's better if we say I will take care of you in this and this and that.
No,
there can be a moment that you say, okay, but I didn't say it specifically in that thing. So it's better at least...
No, because I'm the artist. I'm sitting in my studio and thinking and feeling the weight of the world on my shoulder, and that's why I'm the artist, and you're the business guy, and you have the connection, and you go out in the world that I don't want to go into. So you're responsible for me.
I have to stand for artists, because you said artists don't know anything about money. In my opinion, artists and galleries and gallery owners are professionals that are having a relationship, a professional relationship. So the artist and the gallery are at the same level, and they have the right to talk in a transparent way about all the issues. And I would propose to avoid this kind of patronizing way of talking about artists. I am encouraging artists to be informed about their rights and about their obligations, and about their ethic obligations as well. So I think it's a question, when you are working in other sectors, if you are a professional, you always sign a contract. There is no problem for that. Even if you say, no, that there are some differences. Okay, for example, you can have a house. You can be in love with a house. But when you hire a real estate agent, you sign a contract with him. So why don't you do the same thing with an artist or with a collector as well? It's always the same problem.
Can we have... Eva. Oh.
Well, I'm gallerist for 30 years now. I have never signed a contract. Must say that. I'm not against contracts. But I think that there are possibilities which are in a little bit in the medium point of the two positions that have been expressed here. Our Art Gallery Association, Art Barcelona, some years ago, prepared a document, a text, which was not thought to be a contract, but to be the rear part of the paper we sign every time that an artist makes a deposit of some works of art to our galleries. So, if we go into the contract field, it might be rather complicated, because there are some, let's say, romantic or philosophic aspects of our relationship that once we try to put them written on a contract, they become extremely hard and may be against the artist or against the gallery at some particular position. So the opinion that some of our colleagues here share is that it's obvious that the artist needs a paper that states that this and this and this and this other work have been deposited at the gallery, and that this deposit is regulated by a certain principles, which include, of course, the fact of the reproduction, yes or not, on the internet. You can include a lot of practical things, but not trying to develop into a contract what is a more philosophical kind of relation which really exists between gallery and artist, or artist and gallery.
Well, I agree with that. Lawyers are lawyers, not philosophers. But yeah, do you have... Yeah.
Eva, you spoke about a thing I wanted to ask, but as my short experience as a gallerist, young gallerist, the thing is that my artists were so young, so I think the contrast has to be specific. If there is a young artist, a mid-sized artist, or an established artist, for sure. They all have different kind of frightens or concerns. So my experience is like, for instance, I have a story that I gave a very good contract that was very good for this young artist. She took the contract, and then she came back to me the next day and said, you know, Eva, I'm not going to sign it because I don't understand. And I said, but it's so clear. I mean, I was really focusing on this problematic artist and so on. So she said, I don't know if there is a small print I cannot read. And I say, I don't understand what you're saying. You're going to be more covered. And she said, no, let's do it like this for 1 year without a contract, and then we'll see. So I think there is a passionate reasons, or they think you don't trust me for this, but also the market today has a lot of offer to the artist. So they think, okay, let's see if this gallery is giving me this. If not, I'm free to go to another kind of galleries. So as collectors has a lot of offer today, the artist, the good artist, has a lot of galleries, let's say, to go on change. And so it's not only I trust you and you trust me, but today there is a concern about I have a lot of offers, I don't want to be restricted to you. So what do you think? I mean, what do you think is the reasons that we don't succeed to have really contracts very clear?
I think that's a very interesting question. I think there's commitment phobia on both sides. It's worth remembering that. And I think that also raises an interesting question from the gallery's side about it being in the gallery's interest and not in the artist's interest, and a taboo subject really, that when artists leave galleries, they're free to do so without repercussion, in contrast to other cultural industries where there would be compensation, for example, at some point. And what do you all think in the audience about this idea? It sounds bizarre, it seems completely heretical and taboo. Should an artist compensate their dealer if they leave for a bigger gallery? I mean, I don't know if it would make sense legally how you would even frame that, but it's more of an ethical thing. Do you feel there should be some sort of ethical responsibility as much as a legal question, obligation there? What do we feel about this? Does anyone have a view?
In the meantime,
you must do.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a gallerist.
I think there is the good faith here, and it's great. But for example, as Klaes was saying, the good faith makes in an art fair that you are selling a piece and that it's done. So I think it's good to have a third part, like the fair, who says there was something wrong here between the good faith and now he rejected. Perhaps the little punish is to, well, the fair knows there is a list of collectors, supposed collectors, who are buying and then they are regretting. It's a good way, that's why I like it. I don't know if legally it's possible, of course. Perhaps it's just an information for the fair and for the galleries. About young artists, let's say, it would be interesting to say how to, in a way, to punish, to say, well, if the gallery offers you to produce and to sell, but at the end of the year is not producing you and is not selling you, you will be free to go for sure. And on the other hand, if the gallery is doing his job and you decide to leave, perhaps it's normal that you give something back. I think things have to be like that.
I want to ask. I want to answer to Eva's question.
Sorry. Okay, then.
Because there was a very specific question. So my question would be: was your contract flexible enough for the artist? Because you are talking about the artist thought that, well, let's work for a year and we will see. So was it the possibility inside the contract to be only for a year?
Yes. I offer 3 choices. Yeah, it was like, I'm so flexible. That's my problem sometimes. So I end up saying, okay, if we sign the contract you want, I'm not really covered, you know? So, but it was like that. I changed, and I said, okay, for a period of 6 months, even a year, whatever you want. But she felt that, you know, something was missing there and she couldn't understand. And I said, then I give you my lawyer and you ask whatever. It's for you, for free. No. So at the end of the day, I thought, no, you want to try, you want to test, you don't want to sign, you are not sure about anything. And again, some artists, they think they don't understand, even if they are explained by a lawyer. They just creating, they don't trust. So there are different kind of artists, like people. So it has to be very personalized. At the end of the day, you have a form contract, a contract that is general for everybody, but then you have to personalize a lot. It's like kids. I had 4 artists or 5 artists. Each of them required different things. So you have to have a lawyer in your company, in your gallery, as another employee. and say, okay, is your lawyer, my lawyer, we'll share him. And apart from this, I think it's also there is a necessity of sharing a contract between galleries when you share an artist. There is a very non-transparent codes between galleries, particularly if you are young. Of course, the big fish is going to eat you. They will say, yeah, let's collaborate. I like your artist a lot. I will pay you the 10%. Forget about it. You get paid 6 months, but then forget about it. So there are a lot of, between agents, a lot of holes. That's what I think.
I'd like to come back to the question about art fairs getting involved in contractual agreements between buyers and sellers. I find it's a quite interesting approach to involve an art fair at that level, whereas we have no knowledge whatsoever what your relationships with collectors are, how you establish them, I think every gallery has their own way, their own checklist of things they would want to have in a contract like that. And legally, this is my question to you, Daniel, and to you, Eva, is that absolute at all possible that an art fair would take on the mediation role in a relationship that we have actually no access to whatsoever as art fair organizers?
I think he was not asking for mediation, he was asking more for an official form to follow, I think. So I think you could elaborate, you could draft easily an official form or official contract model.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, without any problem.
I actually agree. I think that's what I would suggest. Yeah. My question would also then be, can I force that upon the galleries to do that? Does every gallery participating in an art fair want to have that contract signed between a collector and themselves?
That's a very good question. I think that's a question to ask the galleries, how galleries would see it. I would imagine it wouldn't be binding, but it would be more a model of practice. But I think, what do galleries think? Well, what do you think?
Why do the galleries want to hide themselves behind the fair? You can, Alberto and Klaus, I'm sorry, but why are you not big enough to manage your relationship to your collectors? You have a legal framework of buying goods. Why you want to involve the art fair? I really have no clue.
I think it's a power thing, Alain. I think it's very difficult if you're a small gallery to take on big collectors.
It's not to take on. They have a commitment. Sorry, Daniel. They're just committing to buying something. It's not a question of power.
So, well, it is if you're going to sue Francois Pinault, for example.
Well, I would love to have that paper, and the problem, at least my problem, is that I have this person who signs like quickly, like okay, I get it, and they forget about this paper, and then at the end of the fair you call them and how can we organize? We are going to make the transport to you. What transport? What are you talking about? Well, you remember you bought this piece. Oh yes, but at the end I decided not to buy it. What are you talking about? You signed a paper. Oh, so now I have to call my lawyer and to start a very, very important thing. So perhaps that's very hard, and perhaps there is something in the middle. I agree with you. I don't know if legally it would be possible or not, but at least it would be interesting to have a simple paper that says, I have bought this piece, or I have not bought this piece. So if you sign it, it's interesting for all the galleries who are in this fair to know that there were collectors who disappeared. And probably it's not a matter of calling a lawyer, but it's a matter of being informed. And it's good for the gallery, it's good for the rest of the collectors, and it's good for the fair.
Yeah. Do you mind if I answer that? I agree with you. I mean, I kind of agree with Alain. I can't see why. You're delivering a service to a collector and vice versa. The collector is buying something, you are selling something. So it's a mutual agreement between you. The art fair has nothing to do with your sales. We have no access to your sales numbers. We have no access to, I mean, this is one of the things that also Georgina would love to know, like, what are the sales like? Well, thank you very much. Now we know, because you're all signing this contract, and we want copies if we want to be the ones who have to be somehow liable if a payment is done or not. I'm not entirely sure that's what everybody wants in terms of transparency, and I can't really see how, I mean, I'm sure there would be a document, a very simple one, simply stating, yes, I'm willing to buy this work, but how can the art fair take the responsibility for that transaction to actually take place? I don't understand that part of it.
I don't think that's what anyone
was saying. It's like a, ¿cómo se dice? Testigo in English?
It's more
witness. You are a witness, and that's all. And probably it can force the collector to rethink twice what he's going to do.
It gives the document a bit more weight. And it's not that the fair is going to suit the collector. The fair provides a document that's going to be used by the galleries that want to, and that can be used by the gallery afterwards. I mean, we're just here throwing ideas, but yeah, I mean, the fairs provide many sorts of documents that the galleries have to fill and and to export, and etc. So why not a form that the collector, when he signs, he knows he's signing a form that can come to the knowledge of the fair as well. And just complete, I disagree that the fair organizers, they don't have anything to do with the sales. Of course, they bring collectors as well. They create an environment for good business for the galleries. So in a way, it's in the interest of the fair also that they don't have too many clients that just disappear in the last day. I don't know.
Yes, but I agree that you are not responsible, but it's good to be there only for not for the details about the sale. It's about, if you said yes, then it's interesting for everyone to know. The one who said yes and he disappeared, it's interesting for us to know. I don't know, Klaes, he was guilty of all these things. Perhaps he should say something more.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely, these things tend to happen very often in art fairs. And therefore, I think the art fair should counteract that by not taking any responsibility. That's not what we are asking for. What we are asking for is a form which enhances the importance of fulfilling the contracts. Either it's mutual, either it's by mouth, or written, and the authority of a written contract is much stronger than the contract, the spoken contract. We are not absolutely not asking the art fair to enter into some kind of legal position. It's just to produce this paper, this contract, as an art fair acquisition contract, and therefore lending it authority.
It would be like a recommendation the art fair do to the gallery.
Can I?
Yeah.
It's funny to observe the discussion from two sides, because it could be, it could be mutual opportunism. The fair gets the exact numbers of sales, and you get your authority.
I don't think that's what he's saying.
No, but that could be an exchange, no? I mean, you get something.
I wouldn't want to tell the art fair what. No, and I don't think that I'm not asking the art fair to enter into any other position than to produce this contract which lends an authority to the actual acquisition process at an art fair. That's everything I ask for.
I just wondered whether any of you have experience in other creative industries apart from visual arts, perhaps in music or acting, and if there are any parallels with contracts in those fields. But I don't know if you work with musicians.
They say contracts, and they are
painting.
surprised why people in the art sector don't sign contracts. Because there are contracts, of course.
I mean, there are also, in the music business, there are managers, and managers procure agreements between the recording companies and the artists, for example. So, one interesting question is whether the role of artist management is going to sort of get bigger in the next decade. It's been mooted quite a bit. And in some respects, in America, there are de facto artist managers who are lawyers, actually. And that could be quite interesting to watch that space. Do you have any thoughts?
No, it's like a publishing company and an author is the same. They sign a contract, so.
Well, I said in the beginning, our problem is that we are very individualist, and there is not a sense of association, of doing things all together, and probably that's the origin of everything. We do the things our own, and the artist, of course, wants to do things in his own, and at the end this is a consequence of non having contracts, probably, because it's not like the big publishing companies that they have thousands of artists, and it's
even the smaller ones.
It's also interesting looking at the music industry, because where there haven't been contracts and the courts have found that there have been exploitative relationships, particularly between managers and artists, like music groups, then the managers have come out very badly. And that's one of the reasons why you've had that greater regulation. So, for example, undue influence, when you have young artists signed up for bands, they're often set aside, these agreements, as being void later on if they were entered in without proper legal representation and they were done in a very one-sided way. So George Michael had a very famous case in the UK about this. And I think those sorts of precedents might have some role in time in the art world. I mean, it's a lot of it's driven by money, and it's the value of what's at stake, really.
I'm very new to the art world, so this might be a naive question, but if you go and buy a limited number special Rolls Royce, you're not leaving the place without going through the magic word down payment. Everything. I mean, you're going through a contract, you're going through a down payment, and that car is yours. Otherwise, it's not.
It's a different shop. But the naive questions are the best questions, I think. They're always the most direct. The best question I ever heard, actually, was when I was in Japan, and it was an interview session with Manish Kapoor, and a young Japanese schoolgirl asked him whether he considered himself an important artist. I think it was brilliant. But that was pretty close.
I'm afraid we are still like when you go to the countryside and you have your ships and there is someone who wants your ships and they say, okay, deal, and that's done with the hand, and that's the problem, is that we do things like that. Like Alain, he said he bought that piece in a museum with a conversation, and it's supposed to be done, but at the end they are not. Probably in a few years there will be more papers, I'm sure, and just to put another confusion in all this thing, we have the galleries also problems not only with the artists or with the collectors, but with the critics or with the museums, because you can find even that in a certain moment there are critics who don't understand that we are representing artists, we are promoting them, not only selling. Selling is a little percentage in the work of a gallery. And then you find out that still the critic is calling the artist to do a project without informing at all to the gallery. And then you say, what's going on? I'm supposed to be the one who builds the strategy with you. So even museums, it's amazing, but there are museums that they still call the artist to buy a piece. What are you doing? Don't you know what's about? It's great if you talk to the artist, but you have to talk to us also. So there is a big general confusion, and I think it's all related to professionalism. It's we still are learning. Unfortunately, it should be changed, but it's not. That's my opinion.
Yeah, just considering that, I mean, it's true that that's a specific market, that relationship is very important, but we are in a very complex world, and the art market, globalized as it is right now. I mean, you don't know everybody. So more you make things clear. I mean, international fairs are an example. I mean, it's impossible to know who are you dealing to.
Well, it's also impossible often with international art sales to know which law even applies to the sale. Yes. So I've had a lot of disputes with artworks and sales, and the first problem for a collector is actually figuring out whether it's New York law or English law, and do you actually want to spend $500,000 in the English High Court working out which choice of law applies, which barristers will find extremely exciting and lucrative, but you don't want to do as a collector. And I think this model would be much better for where these things are made clear.
Yeah, definitely. And again, to come back to the relationship between galleries and artists, for the Brazilian galleries, for instance, when they represent international arts, they do have a contract. I mean, they make sure they have a contract, because they're dealing with artists that are not around the corner, that they go to visit the studio and they know what's going on all the time. So that's the point. And the other is the partnerships with other galleries. That's something that someone mentioned, but that also has to be developed and quite clear, otherwise it's difficult.
Thoughts? I think we should wrap up, so maybe you have...
Yeah, my thought would be that we should be able to make an effort to think about how the other person thinks, because we are used to blame the other. So why? Because Alberto told the museum is contacting the artist instead of contacting me. Why is it that? Okay, and I would ask you, why did your artist didn't say anything to the museum, to the institution? And why the museum doesn't know the real relationship between a gallery and an artist? So I think we should be able to provide more information about our work, how we work, how this relationship works, and once we will have this information, we could blame others because they don't know that information that is available to all. But everything seems to be very secret. It's like everything is secretive. How do I get to a gallery? How do I get in touch with a gallery? How do I start to... So everything is like this. So I think we should be more reflective on our own behavior, and starting from that point of view, think about the other. What does the other need from me?
I'd like to end on that point. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Nicholas Logsdale, the owner of the Listing Gallery, once said to me that running a gallery is like having 3 marriages a year and 1 divorce. For some galleries, it's more like 3 divorces and 1 marriage, depends who you are. But I think what we've perhaps concluded from this is that contracts used in the right way can hopefully breed a sense of trust and transparency, which can help build a beautiful relationship going forward. Okay, thank you very much.